It's Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina up against Chris Sununu of New Hampshire. Today on Political Excess, we're going to do this hypothetical 2024 presidential matchup. This was suggested to me in the comments. I think it's an interesting matchup, so let's dive right into it. Safe states are over a 10-point margin, likely 5 to 10 points, lean under 5 points, and tilt 1 point or less. So how do I see this one going? Well, they both have been reelected as governor of their respective states, and the states that they are from, North Carolina and New Hampshire, those are going to affect this map a little bit differently. With Roy Cooper, he's regarded as a moderate Democrat, so I think in a primary he would struggle. I don't think he has a lot of charisma. I don't think he's really that exciting. He's had some success in North Carolina, but nationally, I think he would pretty much fall flat. He's not what the modern Democratic base is looking for. But if he got to a general election, he would have a little bit more appeal in some areas, probably more so in the suburbs. Chris Sununu, on the other hand, he's won several times as governor of New Hampshire. He's had very high popularity, and over the years he seems to have gotten more moderate. And a lot of the Trump base, I think, is unhappy with Sununu. So some of them might stay home, just like some of the Democratic base. They're going to think Cooper is too moderate, and they'll stay home. So this is going to be interesting. Let's get started in Alaska. That is pretty much a red state, and I think Sununu would win it by over 10 points. Safe for Sununu. Hawaii, that will, of course, be very safe for any Democrat. Cooper wins Hawaii easily. Up to the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California. Those will all be safe for Roy Cooper. I think someone like Sununu would do better than Donald Trump in these states, because he would be viewed as more moderate, but he's still not going to get it under 10 points. How about in Nevada? This would be competitive, and I do have Sununu winning this by a lean margin. I think Cooper is just a little bit too moderate, and Chris Sununu is appealing enough to not scare off a lot of the independents or the swing voters. I think Sununu could win Washoe County, and it would be really close in Clark County. Idaho and Utah, safe for Sununu. How about in Arizona? This was once a red state, and I think Chris Sununu would be able to win it again. Some of those Republicans that have turned away from the party since Donald Trump, enough of them would come back. Enough of the progressive voters from the Democratic base, they would sit it out, and Sununu would win Arizona by 2 or 3 points. How about up in Montana and Wyoming? Those will be safe for Sununu. Let's go to Colorado. That will be just under 10 points. Likely for Roy Cooper. Even though Chris Sununu is viewed as a little bit more moderate, Colorado is just too blue of a state, and Roy Cooper would still win comfortably. How about in New Mexico? I think that would get just under 5 points, and Roy Cooper would win it by a lean margin. North Dakota, South Dakota is safe for Sununu. Nebraska at large, safe for Sununu. The 2nd district, that is the Omaha district, I have Roy Cooper winning that by a lean margin. The trends in that district are away from the Republicans. I think Chris Sununu would do okay there, but not enough to be able to carry it. Kansas and Oklahoma, safe for Sununu. How about Texas? I think Roy Cooper is just not exciting enough to cut into those margins there. And enough voters in these suburban counties outside of Austin and Dallas and Houston, they're going to be more willing to vote for Sununu than someone like Donald Trump. So it would still be a comfortably red state. Let's go up to Minnesota. This state does seem to be pretty much blue no matter what on a presidential level, and I have it as a likely for Roy Cooper, probably just over 5 points. It's actually a tricky state in this matchup. I'm not sure what would happen, but I do think it would stay blue by just over 5 points. How about in Iowa? That I have as likely for Sununu. That would most likely be mid to high single digits. I don't think Roy Cooper is going to make much of a dent in this red trending and red leaning state. Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana, those will all stay safe for Chris Sununu. How about up in Wisconsin? The right Republican can win Wisconsin. I do think it's slowly trending a little bit toward the right, and I think enough of the progressive base will stay home in Dane County, and to a lesser extent in Milwaukee County. I think Chris Sununu would do well enough in the suburbs. He wouldn't get wiped out in the red rural Trump counties, and I do have Sununu winning this by a lean margin, probably 1 to 3 points. How about under Wisconsin in Illinois? Well, this is a pretty blue state, and I think it would still stay over 10 points for Roy Cooper. How about up in Michigan? This is another state that I'm not super confident in. There's a lot of working class voters in here that have switched toward Donald Trump. I'm not sure what they would do with Sununu on the ballot. Depends on what the margin is in a place like Macomb County, but I do think Sununu would make it very, very close. In the end, I did settle on a tilt for Roy Cooper, but I was really on the fence for Michigan. Indiana, safe for Sununu. Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, safe for Sununu. Let's go to Florida. This I have as a lean for Sununu, borderline likely, but I can't go there just yet until I see what the trends are on a presidential level in Florida. Just based on the midterms, then of course this would be likely. But Roy Cooper is technically from the South. That could help him very slightly in certain places in Florida. Chris Sununu is from the Northeast. I think he would be a little bit less relatable in some of these counties. I still think he would win it, but it would be about 4 to 5 points. Let's go above Florida to the critical state of Georgia. This has gone away from the Republicans, and those counties around Atlanta, those are crucial. Cobb, Gwinnett, DeKalb. I do think this would be extremely close, and I could see this going either way. For me, it was basically a coin flip, but in the end, with the trends, and with Roy Cooper being from the nearby state of North Carolina, I did put it as a tilt for Roy Cooper. Let's go to South Carolina. This obviously does border North Carolina, but I still think it's too much of a red state to get under 10, and I have Chris Sununu winning it by a safe margin. How about in North Carolina? This is Roy Cooper's home state. He's the governor here. Typically on a presidential level, I do have the Republican winning it by anywhere from 1 to 4 points. In this particular matchup, with Roy Cooper being the governor, he's not terribly unpopular. I do have him winning it by about 1 to 3 points, so it's a lean for Roy Cooper. It's not overwhelming, but he does do better than most other Democrats. Let's go to Ohio. That will be likely for Chris Sununu. West Virginia, very safe for Sununu. Let's go up to Maine. At large, likely for Roy Cooper. The first district, it's very blue, and that will stay safe for Cooper. The second district, that's much more red and more Trump-friendly. That I have as a likely for Chris Sununu. Now, Maine is another interesting state in this matchup. It does border New Hampshire, so it's actually hard to predict the margins in some of these Northeast states. They're typically blue, and I still think they would stay blue even if it's Cooper up against Sununu. Now let's go to New Hampshire. This is Chris Sununu's home state. In the recent midterm, Chris Sununu won re-election for governor easily by a safe margin. It is down a little bit from his landslide win 2 years prior, and national politics are not the same as statewide politics. But I think Chris Sununu's popularity would be enough for him to carry the state, and I actually have it as a likely margin for Sununu, probably 5 to 6 points. I do think people would come out and want to support him. They know him, they trust him, and he would actually do what is typically hard for Republicans to do, and that is win the state of New Hampshire. Let's go on to Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland, and Washington, D.C. Those are all safe for Roy Cooper. Now, would Chris Sununu do better than someone like Donald Trump in some of these states, like Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island? Yes, I think he would do a little bit better. Would the margins get under 10? I don't think so. But I do admit the margins are hard to predict in this matchup. Let's go on to Pennsylvania. After considering everything, a lot of it would come down to the turnout in the Philadelphia suburbs. I think some of them would come back and be willing to vote for Sununu. I think he could win Erie County, and therefore I do have a very close margin, but Sununu winning it by a tilt, probably under 1 point. But Pennsylvania, like some of these other states, it's a very tough call and could go either way. Now let's go on to the very last state, and that is Virginia. It's become typically a blue state at this point, and in this matchup, I have it as a likely for Roy Cooper. And that is my matchup, and that would result in 269 electoral votes for Chris Sununu and 269 electoral votes for Roy Cooper. And that is a tied election, so it would go to the new incoming U.S. House. And this is the first tie I've had out of every matchup I've ever done. And I did not plan it out like this. This is the result that came out at the end. And it just goes to show that there are a lot of these states that are extremely close. Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania. And we see some unusual outcomes. North Carolina going blue, New Hampshire going red, Nevada and Arizona, those are also back in the Republican column. And then there's plenty of other states where the margins are really just hard to predict, like Wisconsin, New Mexico, South Carolina, and even a lot of New England states. But I do think it would come down to which issues these candidates would actually emphasize and run on, what the national environment would be like, and who they would choose as their running mate. All of those things could sway the election in certain states by 1 or 2 points. So it's a very tough call. Your map might look different than mine. I would actually be interested to know which changes you would make to this map. I don't think there's any chance these two would actually win the nominations. But if they did, I found this one fun to play out. It was one of the more difficult ones I've done. It's just tough to predict the working class turnout, exactly which way the independents and the suburban voters would go, but I do think in the end it would be extremely close, and I have it as a tie in the Electoral College. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this matchup, and which states would you change? Would Trump voters turn out less for Chris Sununu, or would progressive voters turn out less for Roy Cooper? Let me know down below. And on your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.